Welcome guys, gals, and non-binary pals to this week's episode of Buffy Boys, your weekly review of Buffy the Vampire Slayer from a queer, literary and feminist perspective. My name is Joel, I'm one of your hosts, and with me as always is your adaptable host.
Brian, hi.
Hi Brian, how are you doing?
Grand.
Adapting to the ongoing hermitage in our socially, and some may say occasionally emotionally, distant life.
Yeah, it's it's been very difficult for me. I've had such a change in lifestyle. I used to be so outgoing, gregarious, friendly, nice, supportive.
You know, actually I think how your lifestyle has changed in current circumstances. I think you have to go outside more now than you were previously.
Total rubbish.
No, you specifically have to make an effort to go outside now, where you used to previously go outside only when you mandated, when you deigned.
Why would you lie? Why would you lie? Why are you such a liar?
Not lie at all. So this week we are going to be talking about season 4, episode 10 of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, called Doomed.
Yeah.
But before we do so, Brian, do you want to set the stage for us with a little Buffy and summary?
No, but I will. Okay, so this is season 4, episode 11.
I think I might have said 10, episode 11.
It's 11, yeah. It was first aired on January 18th, 2000. So we have reached not the apocalypse, the
millennium.
Okay. Millennium, which is good.
And the midway point, right?
Of the show?
Yeah.
No, that's episode 20.
Oh, okay, very good.
Yeah. Because there are 144 episodes, that's episode 67 is 100. Well, wait, no, wait. 72. Okay. So this was directed by James A. Contner, who last directed The Initiative. It was written by Marty Noxon, Jane Espenson, and David Fury. Marty Noxon last wrote Wild at Heart, Jane Espenson last wrote Pangs, and David Fury last wrote Fear Itself. So apparently this was originally supposed to be a David Fury only written episode, but what happened was that it was David Fury's wedding that week, so they had to all kind of just drop what they were doing at various points to go do wedding stuff. Apparently Jane Espenson had to leave the wedding early in the night to go continue writing for the episode. And to be honest, the episode kind of smacks of that. It feels unfinished.
Not necessarily, not specifically unfinished, but maybe definitely the combination of a number of different scenes which haven't been finished. Okay, you're right.
Just like I think this is the first episode of Buffy so far in which it is just business as usual. There's no real driving motivation. There's no specific. It just feels like another Buffy episode, which is very funny given how distinctly Hush writes against that idea. Okay, well, here's your Buffy summary. Buffy and Riley come to terms with each other's true identity. 3 demons assemble tokens, a heart, some bones, a talisman stolen from Giles, to open the Hellmouth and bring the apocalypse. Buffy, Riley and the gang stop them. A suicidal Spike is dragged along. He discovers he can kill demons and vampires, which cheers him up. That's pretty accurate, actually.
No, I'll challenge that. There's no heart in the tokens. It's
blood.
Blood is
blood bones. Yeah, you're right.
Okay, so before we sink our teeth in this particular apocalypse, for a bronze banter this week, we wanted to return to our award-winning segment of giving you a rundown of what we're watching in quarantine. So Brian, something we've been threatening to talk about now for a few weeks, but other things have taken precedence.
Sure.
As we finished watching Devs.
Yeah, we did finish watching Devs. Alex Garland. It was really good. I thought the last episode was really, really moving and really odd and really good science fiction.
Yeah, it was definitely. I think I can definitely recommend it to most people. I think that some of the science fictional and existential concepts were explored very well.
Yep.
In terms of the outcome or the themes of it, maybe not necessarily stuff we haven't seen before, but I think if you're unfamiliar with that kind of media, it's actually a really good introduction to what the difficulties are between a deterministic or a non-deterministic universe, and
absolutely
the implications of all that. Beautifully acted.
Funnily enough, reasonably similar to Westworld in terms of its themes of determinism, knowledge, and systematic, or essentially just determinism via computer, whereas determinism is usually configured due to the kind of existence of an omniscient godlike figure.
Yeah.
Both take the approach of a systematic kind of determinism. And
I think you can take actually 3 shows we watched in the last couple of months and put them on a scale from light to heavy in terms of how they engage with certain themes, kind of Picard to Westworld to Devs, on kind of overlapping themes around
Sure.
kind of machine identity and the nature of being and all that kind of stuff. So I highly enjoyed it. And as I creep towards gay death at 30,
It's a very rude thing to say. Someone who's turning 30 within a month.
already planning your funeral. I'm starting to appreciate more programs like this, where it's like that was like a neat little, like, what was it, like 8 episodes, 9 episodes
Of Devs, I
Devs.
think it was 10, maybe.
Yeah, but it's like, yeah, that's all I needed. I'm very much moved away from the idea with television where, and I don't, to be fair, I think very few programs actually do this, that in our space anymore, but where it mandates a 25 episode season per season, that kind of thing. So yeah, it was kind of neat and one and done, but like, yeah, definitely I think it's probably one of the lighter introductions to the Alex Garland like style, as in like
I think Ex Machina is much more consumable.
perhaps more consumable, but less modern day in a way.
Sure.
Yeah, very good. I
was
enjoyed
really
it. Yeah.
Have been watching a little bit of Midnight Gospel as well, which is the new TV show by Pendleton Ward, who did Adventure Time back in the day. Pendleton Ward obviously had a very fucked up childhood, and he creates these cartoons with incredibly psychedelic, kind of trippy imagery. And this show specifically is about a reimagining or a visual retelling of a podcast that he likes about meditation by a guy whose name I cannot remember. But basically it's just episodes of the podcast slightly re-recorded in parts and then set to really, really trippy, kind of like fantasy, science fiction storylines, visual storylines that don't match up with the dialogue, but it's usually two people talking to each other about spirituality, meditation, self, drugs, stuff like that, and the imagery will be showing a like a fantasy hero trying to free her husband who blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, so it's adapted from a podcast by a comedian and creator called Duncan Russell, who, as you said, kind of interviews people who are maybe they're from the real life, Wiccans, or they've had some kind of near death experience or a lot of experience with like psychotropic and ayahuasca and all that kind of stuff. Just coming from different faiths and different creeds and different experiences, talking about again really kind of the nature of being. It's a slightly difficult one to recommend because I think you wouldn't start with it. You'd need something a little trippier in your wheelhouse to ease into it, because even for us, there was a couple of episodes where we were trying to get a grip on what's the format here, what's happening. But it's really engaging.
It's on Netflix as well.
It's on Netflix, yeah. And I think in this day and age, I think people are a little more accepting. Like, let's just sit down and watch something weird and kind of talk a bit about life and death and who we are and all that kind of stuff in a way that's not necessarily very heavy.
Sure, yeah, no, absolutely. And one thing I'll say about it is that, like, while there's a reasonable amount of spirituality in it, there was one episode, at least so far, that we've watched that was really descending of all that, which I thought was really good.
And in terms of your own Catholic sensibilities, how did you feel engaging with the plurality of faiths there? B. Ryan,
What?
you better get that out.
Why?
That is coarse and crass.
So other things we've been engaging with, you've been playing through the Dark Souls games still. I think you probably talked about that in the podcast before, but it's been taking up all your time and all your conversation with me, which is okay.
See, this is a thing, dear listener, that you may be familiar with if you're in a relationship like mine, or you may potentially be in a successful relationship. But Brian likes to introduce me to things, encourage me to engage with them, and then take me to task when they inevitably fill up every waking minute of my brain's bandwidth.
Joel, the implication there being that, like, talking about something around you shouldn't inspire an insanity. That's like,
I'm either wrong or off about things. You know this.
That's true.
But yeah, briefly, I've been really enjoying it. I've been kind of...
You've gotten through Dark Souls 2, thankfully.
Yeah, I've very specifically been working through the whole series. I've talked about it before, about how it's kind of a very engaging thing for me for many ways, in terms of game design, in terms of just really kind of a meditative approach to repetition and all that in games. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun to really think about kind of, world building and, game mechanics and how you balance those things and how you lead the player from one place to the other and what it means when you do things. And yeah, if I was ever going to do it, I think now would be the time to
get
work through that.
You're right. I was playing a little bit of Final Fantasy VII Remake, and I find it terrifying.
You seem very weirded out by it.
I'm really very weirded out by it. It's very cool. I think it's maybe not a hugely brilliant game in and of itself. It's very kind of like new JRPG, which I find to be often too action focused and too, I don't know, but visually really good, except for the incredibly bad textures at times, and quite well characterized for a story that's so old by this point. It's the original game was 1997, so that's 23 years later, but it's been cool. We also started watching the other day The Outsider, which is the TV show that ran on HBO from January to March, which is adapted from a Stephen King novel, also called The Outsider.
Yeah, it's one of Stephen King's most recent, it's 2018.
Well, in fairness, he's probably written like 6 books since then.
True, and not a period of his work that's necessarily considered to be his greatest creative output, but we've been enjoying it very well so far.
Yeah, it's been like a bit schlocky and a bit like silly and procedural, but also some genuine like scares and like creepiness and fun.
I think there's some light kind of true detective elements to it. And actually, the thing, this might be a deep cut, but you know, you're all listening to a podcast, so I will infer you may listen to other podcasts. But a podcast from the Welcome to Night Vale wheelhouse called Alice Isn't Dead, which involves a woman who's a truck driver traveling across America trying to find her missing wife, and encountering various just like horrible things in small towns.
Wait, Joel, you said her missing wife?
I did indeed.
I think you must mean him.
No, I did.
Him
missing wife. That is like, yeah. A woman. Yes, sorry. Let me correct that, Brian. A woman traveling across Middle America trying to find.
Like you weren't engaging. You weren't engaging with the joke I was making until you were like, oh, "Wait, I can put my own stamp on this. I'm gonna run with this."
Question mark. It's a little known but highly effective alternative to yes and, which is, but what this about this instead? Here's my joke as well. But to close the loop on that, it's it reminds me a lot of Alice Isn't Dead in the sense of being about a very Stephen King recurring concept, which is that certain parts of America outside of cities are just cesspools of like emotional and societal embedded rot, which is his opinion, not mine. But yeah, it creates some very sticky, haunting kind of Georgia imagery of kind of like warm blood on a you know, a kind of like a mosquito ridden night kind of thing. I kind of wandered into that sense, but I got there in the end.
Did you?
I liked it. I'm liking it. I'm enjoying it. We've been spooked. I've been spooked going to bed for the first time in a while.
I was a little spooked.
I've been running away from turning off the lights. I'm like, oh yeah, turning off the lights, leaving Booker in here to die, and then running away.
Indeed. Okay, so this episode, not great, right?
No, we need to transition in some way. So, many of the characters in these programs we've been watching have been doomed, much as this episode deals with the concept of being doomed. Wouldn't you say so, Brian?
No. So, season 4, episode 11, Doomed. For my money's worth, it just feels like a transitional, we needed something here episode. There's an apocalypse and it means nothing.
I think that, I think a lot of, this definitely isn't an apocalypse I remember in the list of apocalypses that happen in Buffy. Apocalypse. I think a lot of genre shows have these episodes, which we tend to overlook as fans, which is like there are tentpole events. All shows have tentpole events, but some genre shows massively rely on, like, we need a couple of episodes just to move the needle forward 10% towards the conclusion.
Yeah, sure.
So like a lot actually happens in this episode. Like, you can really concretely say that there is an apocalypse, that Riley and Buffy find out about each other very specifically. They go through a breakup and a reconciliation, and Spike finds new purpose in his life, and also Jaws does some weird stuff, and Anya's question mark. But it doesn't feel very substantial. It doesn't feel, it's a very fast food episode. I don't feel filled by it. Yeah, no, I mean, like, it's just, and like previously when they did episodes like this in Buffy, it was Monster of the Week, which was a pleasure. So you get episodes where like it was bad, but you were enjoying it because it was like a new thing, an interesting thing. Whereas the demons in this episode, they just kind of do the thing, not for any purpose. They want to bring in a bit in apocalypse. Why? Who knows? And it's all just a structure to slightly develop Buffy and Riley's relationship further, to the point where they've developed some themes, but also they kind of end up finishing the episode
in exactly the same place as they started. They don't have more trust. They don't have more engagement. They just kind of got through a thing.
Yeah, and something in terms of I think you're absolutely right that if you're going to have a monster week episode, you need a monster which sustains your interest, even for 15, 20 minutes or so on. Actually, specifically what this episode made me realize, what I don't like in terms of monsters on this show or similar shows is either make it a complete monster or make it sentient, so like a mantis lady or something that can articulate.
But like bubbling noises coming from like a humanoid kind of like monster that doesn't actually say anything because they didn't want them to give the like...
Yeah, like these were basically three guys with horns who kind of just had that, like, you look like a punch bag of a demon, like, and these and they should be filling background shots in a demon bar, not actually motivating the episode. But I like the extremes. I always I like something completely monstrous or something that's like a dark mirror to something human, and this is just kind of like fodder really as a threat.
So the idea is that they're trying to gather these things to cause the apocalypse. At the beginning of the episode, there's a nice we have to acknowledge there is an underlying thematic thing that's going on here. So the idea of doomed is that Buffy feels like she is stuck into a predetermined pattern in terms of what her life is going to be. She feels like she has to repeat the same problems with her love life, that apocalypses are going to continue to happen. She is destined to be the Slayer and cannot be anything else. And Riley challenges that, and for that she kind of rejects him. So they do actually go back to the high school, and that's kind of like the idea of like, no, she is doomed to repeat this. But even that, like, I mean, it's not a great metaphor. The whole thing doesn't really hang together that well.
Yeah, I suppose in many ways one of the central conceits of the episode in terms of their interaction is Buffy feeling like that she's on this revolving kind of lazy Susan of apocalypses, where personally and professionally these things keep recurring. I think she's specifically upset by the fact that she thought Riley was basically normal and he's like, oh, you're one of those, as in like one of us.
Did you notice that the characterization they have of Riley in this episode is very similar to Owen in Never Kill a Boy on the First Date?
Draw a line for me there.
Well, Owen, the problem she has with Owen is that he's like, oh, that's so much fun. I felt so alive doing all this, like, gave me such purpose doing all this, like, killing of demons or, like, the danger that we experienced. And this episode, Riley is saying, oh, like, demon slaying, it's so much fun and it gives you so much purpose. And Buffy's like, you don't understand what's going on at all. Yeah,
so what do you think of that central conflict they have where he's basically saying, look, this stuff might have happened to you before, but it's the first time you've dated me. Yeah. And specifically challenges her and says, look, you want to say your moody dramatic thing as the sun comes up over Sunnydale Hill or whatever, but Buffy, potentially you actually just want to wallow in your sadness and you need to actually make an effort to, like, she's saying obviously you don't understand that this is a job for you, whereas for me it's my destiny, etc. What do you think of that conflict there?
Yeah, I mean, like, to be honest, I think it's hugely disrespectful of Riley, like, as in
of Riley to say this.
Yeah. So maybe that's just my personal politics rather than, like, acknowledging reasonable writing problems, i.e., like, Riley, it feels like Riley doesn't understand her experiences and he doesn't have a good basis on which to say any of these things or to suggest any of these things. But I mean, at the same time, if you want to introduce a character who does break Buffy out of her cycle, out of her approach and into a new, better way of coping, that's kind of one of the things you have to do, is have them kind of trample over her history to improve what can come in the future. But at the same time, like, he doesn't try to understand her. He doesn't significantly try to, like, empathize with her experiences. He kind of says, he simplifies her experiences hugely. He's like, oh, you had some bad issues with men before, obviously, but like that, I'm not going to be like that. And it's like, it's just a lot more complicated and more genuine. Like, realistically, like, maybe this is not what the show is trying to say in its foundation, but like my politics would kind of be that, like, surely Buffy like deserves some space to grieve, some space to grow and to feel her feelings to some degree. Yeah. As opposed to kind of being rushed towards, oh, maybe this, simple guy can fix her.
Yeah, and I think it's obviously a big reflection of the viewpoint and the perspective that he's expressed previously about how it is his role to protect her. Yeah. I think there is an interesting interplay there in between the fact that his, many of his instincts kind of echo this kind of as we said, more traditional masculinity and protecting the girl and all that kind of stuff. But when he sees how powerful she is, he kind of doesn't hesitate around that. It's almost like he wants to say, "Oh, I want you to stay safe," etc. But he is specifically like awed by the power and strength she has, her resilience, how she can, he's like, "Oh, you never go after a demon like that by yourself," and she's like, "Well, I do," and I don't think he risks that. I don't think he's like, there's never anything as unlikable for him where he's like, "But you're a girl, you can't do this," that kind of thing. So I think it keeps him on the right side of, maybe not the voice of correctness in terms of what he's actually saying, but not completely off piste either.
Sure. But I mean, yeah, like ultimately there's like a genuine tension being created here between Buffy and Riley in terms of their perspectives and their like Buffy's reluctance towards him, that like, I mean, he kind of has to persuade her to be in a relationship with him at this point, which kind of remains being the storyline going forward. So in season 5, when they do break up, like he kind of just says like, "Yeah, she doesn't love me."
Yeah.
It's like, maybe you didn't want to persuade her to go out with you.
Yeah, I suppose it's kind of an either or kind of situation where, like, yes, you shouldn't have to persuade people to stay with you or to go out with you, but I think Buffy, to a certain degree, at least at the moment, is driven by the fact that he is specifically motivated for it, because she does have that kind of occasional sense of like, where does she fit in things and not being wanted and all that, and for having him to say, look, he specifically says, "I'm not going to force myself on you, I'm not going to scare you, but I'm not going to give up until I have to." There's something compelling about that, I think, which is well intentioned. Fair
enough. One of the themes I thought, in terms of, if we're talking Buffy versus Riley kind of issues, the episode itself highlights quite specifically the contrast between the initiative's approach to demon killing and handling and the Scoobies. Mm-hmm. So there's a scene where Buffy and Giles are kind of like, really specifically doing this kind of co-working kind of thing with all the Scoobies. They're all working together to kind of research what's going on here. Mm-hmm. They're trying to figure out why these demons are looking to gather these things, how to stop them, etc. And while they're doing that, Riley is briefing his troops. On
not his acting
TROUPE, his troop, on these demons, and he's basically saying this is your standard
kill, crush, destroy.
Kill, crush, destroy. We just want to go out and nab it. Here are our pheromone detecting machines. We'll grab them that way. And that's obviously a major issue, because in this season generally, there's lots of science versus magic kind of conversation and issues. And ultimately, like the initiative, they even have a conversation with Forrest and Riley, where they're talking about how Riley's asking Forrest about the Slayer, if he's ever heard of what the Slayer is, and Forrest is like, "Oh, that's just a myth, lol." And it's like, there's literal demons standing in front of you, and they're kind of saying, "Oh, they're just animals," and it's very like blinkered and stupid for the context of the show.
Yeah, and specifically that the Slayer is a myth used by demons, or what they call hostile subterrestrials, to keep their own kind of kind in line. But yeah, so basically what's very clearly illustrated by this is that by having that arrogance of like, okay, well, we have the superior military force, we've scientifically categorized them, that there is nothing left to learn about them. Whereas with the mysticism and the approach that the Scoobies have, Warlock's flog at times, there's always an openness to be like, but what don't we know? And specifically what Riley misses here is by treating them as animals which have purely instinctual behaviors. They don't really get that the demons have this whole layer of their own myth and ritual,
drive and like motivation and
essential motivation,
patterns,
looking that they could be looking for things like a talisman to open a gateway. They're really seeing it just as they're here to destroy.
Yeah, and very interestingly, I was reading an essay in Fear and Trembling in Sunnydale, which is the book, compilation of essays about Buffy, the Vampire Slayer, and philosophy, and an essay by Andrew Aberdeen called Balderdash and Chicanery, Science and Beyond. They are talking about this episode specifically, and they say, he says, both groups seek to research and defeat the same phenomena, but deploy very different methodologies. The archive versus the laboratory. Mystical powers versus military weaponry. However, although the Scoobies can appropriate initiative-style techniques when necessary, as in Innocence, the initiative's Grade 2 perspective always prevents them from reciprocating. Which is very true. Like, the initiative never finds a way to incorporate the learned knowledge of the kind of the non-scientifical, which, I mean, like, I'm not sure if, I'm kind of struggling with it as a metaphor or as a point that they're trying to make. I think within the universe, I think science versus magic is a very, like, worthwhile point because, like, if magic exists, don't ignore it kind of thing. But for the world, greater world at large kind of thing, if what you're trying to communicate as a show is, science can only take you so far, I kind of just really disagree with that point.
Yeah, I would say that, I wouldn't say that the initiative's approach represents science in its entirety, because there's many ways in which science has actually interacted with magic, even to date and in future, when it has been synergistic. I think the initiative's problem, what they represent, is an incuriosity.
Rigidity, yeah.
Rigidity, and a sense that, a belief that the show proves to be patently false, which is that there are no worlds left to conquer, that every dark corner has been exposed, and because of that, it leaves them exposed themselves to things coming out of the dark. So I think their particular brand of science is highly, highly reductive, and that's why it's ineffective. But I think that we see even in kind of Angel and kind of Wolfram and Hart, the way that law firm kind of uses a combination of like magically imbued technology and all this kind of stuff, that it can be done well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to keep an eye on throughout the season, but I do think that it's another symbol of Buffy and Riley's inability to really communicate and to continue to be together, if you get me, or their incompatibility.
Yeah, and Riley kind of presents it as, that the fact that they both hunt demons, or as he euphemistically puts it, they're both fry cooks, is a way in which they're similar. And I think what Buffy really identifies, and she kind of goes back and forth on this throughout the season, is that that's superficial. They happen to occupy similar spaces, but what's more substantial is the way in which they engage with things. How they do things is more important than what they are doing. And we see this obviously in the Disillusion, where she tries to work with Professor Walsh, and eventually culminating in Adam, who is obviously the aggressive intersection of science and magic.
Absolutely. Okay, so other things we wanted to talk about. We do actually go back to high school in this episode. I read a bit of trivia that you see Catherine Madsen's
Magazine.
Yeah,
so
Catherine Madsen.
Amy the Rat's mother from episode 3, or original episode 3.
Witch, sorry, her statue apparently is on the ground here somewhere. Apparently in the original script, Willow was supposed to step on this statue, and it was supposed to give her evil eyes in response, but it got cut because of probably budget reasons. But they go back to high school. And that's a real part of the kind of the doomedness of it all. The episode opens with there being an earthquake, which is portentous of the apocalypse that's oncoming. But it specifically reminds Buffy of Prophecy Girl, in which there is an earthquake which portends her death. So she goes and talks to Giles, and she's like, in this episode, and she's like, "Oh, there's an earthquake. That has meant before that I'm going to die."
Yeah, although I know very little about this, but I was a little surprised to find out that there was only been one earthquake in that area of California over 2.5 years. Yeah. And then we do have a scene with Buffy and Giles in Giles's apartment's courtyard, where Anthony Hegg's dialogue has been judiciously replaced by after the fact recording of kind of extra, a cleaner take, presumably.
Yeah.
And it's just incredibly obvious because his mouth isn't fully synced up with what he's saying.
It's bizarre.
And the audio of what he's saying is much louder than Sarah Michelle Gellar's lines in person. So it's really jarring, because you're seeing someone who looks like they're muted, and then a narrator trying to lip sync them on top of it.
It's very uncanny valley, yeah.
Yeah, it's very strange.
In terms of the the feeling of doomedness, you also have a miniature kind of expression of that in Willow in the episode. She sees what's his name again? Percy, who she tutored in high school, who is at the party that she's at with his girlfriend. His girlfriend gets kind of jealous of the attention that he's showing to Willow, and he's like, "Oh, she's just some nerd. Ignore her. She's crap," kind of basically. And it's that kind of repetition of oh, Willow hasn't been able to break away from the kind of persona she had in high school. So that kind of repetition and feeling of doomedness kind of does build into her character and into the structure of the episode. And then later on in the season, we also have like Spike chiding both Willow and Xander for their kind of groupie nature, that they're just kind of addendums to Buffy's hero journey, and that kind of stuff that is sowing the seeds of discord, which it will reoccur very much so towards the end of this season, where you get a really fractured Scooby Gang who have to come together to save the day.
Yeah, I think, and obviously Spike, I think we kind of see from the viewer's perspective, is very specifically doing this to irritate them.
Yeah, well, he has no way to like damage them with his fists anymore or his teeth, so he does it with his words.
Yeah, words can be as sharp as a serpent's tooth. But yeah, he does specifically zone in on these insecurities, and I think kind of, you know, it's actually kind of a weird moment for the show to revisit the old set of the high school, or literally or figuratively, and kind of have, you know, the bits of the burnt out mayor that they're stepping on. They're in the library, but the library itself is like 3 feet lower than it used to be because it's been blown up. And really engage with the fact that version of the show and that experience for both the characters and the viewer isn't coming back, really. But yeah, I think we kind of see a proper embedding of Spike as a character here, in the sense of, I think his jokey dynamic as kind of like a irascible kind of layabout irritant in the group, but also kind of like a truth teller, our funny English cousin kind of vibe to it, is very much there.
I quite like the scene where he tries to stake himself. It was quite funny.
Yeah, where he throws himself on the table, stake like in a grip, which is like incredibly complex, given that, like, as far as we can see, if a vampire brushes against a stake, he can stake himself.
True, yeah.
He shrinks all of his punk rocker clothing in the tumble dryer, and instead has to wear a Hawaiian shirt and some big cargo pants. It's all well played and very comic. Yeah.
Yep, no, it's quite comedic. And then, yeah, but like, you know, Spike's character is definitely being very well established here, and we get the additional info that he can now attack demons, but not humans, which is, you know, a real source of pleasure for him because he likes attacking things. We're unsure as to how exactly the chip in his head determines what is a demon. Maybe there's some sort of like DNA tracing where, like, you know, if he like punched them with like gloves on, he could punch humans or something.
Yeah, and like and we may find this out in future episodes. I'm not saying this is yet a plot hole, but I would question, like, how is it that, you know, if he were to punch say a vampire in human form and he didn't realize they were a vampire, would his brain set off or not?
Yeah, is it neurological or is it
behavioral, or is it actually, because like I would say, given that it's all about behavioral modification and psychology, I would imagine it's some kind of negative reinforcement chip where when he feels that he's attacking a human, he gets shocked, basically.
For sure, yeah.
It would be much more plausible.
I don't remember fully the details, but in season 6 or 7, he is able to attack Buffy because she's come back from the dead, quotation marks. And I think it's, she takes that as a sign that she's not human. So we'll get to that when we get to it, I suppose. But I can't remember what the resolution is there. I think it might be that his chip is broken or something.
So, again, very broadly remembering this, I think his chip definitely does malfunction. I think there's some interaction there with the first as well, or there's definitely something. There's something along the lines in season 7 about where he shouldn't be able to attack humans, but he is, because the first is circumventing his chip.
Yeah,
but Riley comes back and removes the chip, I'm pretty certain.
No, I'm not sure about that now. Because Riley comes back in season 5 and then never comes back again.
Well, maybe my chronology on that might not be right, or else someone from the initiative comes or something like that.
Okay. Yeah. Anyway, so I think that's I think that's a lot of the points we had to talk about this episode. Do you have anything else you wanted to?
Yeah, I think overall, I think it's kind of a nice, you know, it's not a super memorable episode in many ways, but it's actually quite a succinct. You know, you progress Willow's story, you progress Anders, you progress Spike's and Riley's and Buffy's, but I think you're right in that they end up in a position that's not massively divorced from where they started. I do think that Riley has good chemistry in the scene with the gang. I think he's a kind of good addition in that way, when he's trying to pretend that he's not a commando.
Sure.
He's like, gee golly guys, I was just here paintballing, which proves that he is as incapable of lying as Buffy is. So that's another way in which they're
perfect
compatible.
Soulmates, yeah.
I thought an interesting note was when she finds out he's one of the commandos, she actually assumes that he isn't Riley Finn from Iowa. That entire identity is kind of a cover story, you know. So I think for Riley, there's like a real challenge where things for him are just very simple at the moment. Like he's at a point where he is serving his country, he's doing the right thing, he's fighting bad guys, he's working for Professor Walsh, and it is going to be quite challenging for him to kind of break out of that, as you know, seeing that the world is very messy in terms of who the good or bad guys are.
Yeah, you're right. Let's see how that develops in future episodes.
Let's keep an eye on it, Brian.
Okay, so in terms of dusting, do you have any Buffy bits for us, Joe?
Gosh.
Kill, Crush, Destroy. That's a Lost in Space reference, right?
Is it?
I think so.
Jaws is knocked out again in this episode.
Oh, he is. You're right, yeah.
So let's note that.
I thought it was a really cheap thing to have Giles be the person who owns this talisman. It's like, why bother even writing that? Just have it be some librarian in some British museum.
There's a time-honored tradition of them going to some big character's apartment and finding them dead, etc. But essentially, so Giles, they're looking for the word of Valus or something along those lines. They assume it's a text. It's actually a talisman that he's bought in a sorcerer's estate sale. But I was hoping it wouldn't happen. When I watched him realize this, I was like, of course, several seconds after he realizes that the demons attack.
Somehow knowing that he had it, and
but
total nonsense.
Yeah, so it's like, again, the Hellmouth is like a really interesting motivator for the show, but it's very rarely actually shown, except in several key episodes, and obviously as a much more significant part of season 7. But throughout the show, I actually think it's quite weird that one of the maybe handful of times that we directly engage with the Hellmouth
is this episode,
is this episode.
And Buffy does throw herself into the Hellmouth to go retrieve a demon from it, and Riley pulls her out, metaphorically pulling her out of her own dark, doomed perspective.
Yeah. So like she goes full Gandalf, goes down after the Balrog to catch this demon, and now in fairness, he does loop this cord around it, Gurgur, to counterbalance it, but with his 3-4 fingers pulling this little wire, he pulls Buffy and a demon which he identifies, which is 120 kilograms, back up out of the hole.
Well, he's on a bunch of super serum, right?
Yeah, to a certain degree, yeah. But I still think specifically the point is he's not that strong. No one's that strong.
Yeah, sure. Okay, I don't think I have any specific Buffy bits, really. Yeah, I don't. Not much to say about the episode.
Buffy bit light episode, I think.
In terms of fashion, we have Xander wearing the worst shirt I've ever seen anyone ever wear. It is a circus tent made into a shirt.
No, it is his taco stand uniform.
Is it? Are you sure?
While he's wearing it, he says he needs to go and change out of something that smells less like anchovies. So I'm assuming, to being generous,
he's a delivery guy though. And he has to wear a hat, so maybe I'm not convinced that he has to wear that shirt.
Okay, fair enough.
Willow is wearing quite a nice jumper jacket in this episode. It's kind of like a shearling fringed kind of thing with a full curtain on her on the fabric body stuff. Buffy wears a red jacket at one point and a cream jacket at another point.
She wears a tight red jacket that's very, the buttons go really low. And I find she often wears clothes that are very difficult to fight in. You know? And I know I'm sure places have seasons. I always find it a little weird when I see people in California wearing clothes that are more winter.
Yeah, for sure.
Orientated.
And of course Spike wearing Xander's hand-me-downs because he has destroyed his clothes. It's pretty great too. I quite liked Riley's kind of sweater hoodie kind of thing. It was like a knitted hoodie. It was just kind of nice and very 90s. Yeah, that's all the fashion notes I have.
Yeah. So I suppose
do you have a death count?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of a death count for this episode, we have one partier at the Aftershock College party who is drained of blood by the Varal demon and has a symbol ostensibly from Gravity Falls inscribed into his chest. And we have one of the demons which jumped into the Hellmouth as a sacrifice, and the other who Spike triumphantly but unhelpfully threw into the hole after him, 2/3 completing the ritual to destroy the world. I think we can probably add this episode to our apocalypse count as well. I know it's probably few of those throughout the show, but this is an official accredited Sunnydale apocalypse.
Apocalypse TM. Great. Okay, and what's your rating?
What's my rating for this episode? I will give this episode a 6.9 children's bones.
Okay, great. Tell me about that.
I I kind of wish I could rate it higher because I don't think it has any particular sins as an episode. I think there's funny parts in it. I think the character development is worthwhile, and I think that it's necessary. And it's a bit of a meal of an episode, and particularly coming so hot on the heels of something that's so strong. Of
course, yeah.
I think doesn't do it any favors.
Fair. I'm going to give it 5.5
wow.
naked limbos out of 10. Yeah, I mean,
don't like it,
the worst sin you can commit in my book is being a boring Buffy episode. It's boring. I don't care. I'm never going to watch this episode again if I can help it. Until the next time I rewatch the show, which is going to be in a couple of years' time probably. But yeah, no, just don't care.
Speaking in terms of rewatching Buffy episodes and Buffy Bits, just really emphasize the fact that we have very clearly established that Claire Sapphics of Bon Appetit,
is a huge Buffy fan.
Her favorite show is Buffy, and she's watched it multiple times. And
I heard
is a good person.
I heard that she's secretly listening to our podcast.
I heard that too in my sleep as you whispered it in my ear.
Yep. Okay. Let's move on to the Cordelia Chase. So this week was the Somnambulist.
Somnambulist,
which was awful.
Which is for those of you who have not yet been acquainted with the term, is a word for a sleepwalker. Mm-hmm. Fascinating episode, really terrible, but one of my favorite terrible episodes of Angel.
It just goes in so many crazy directions. It drops immediately.
I think I set this up for you, right? Jeremy Renner, Hawkeye, very very young Jeremy Renner is in this episode, playing the role of a Puritan who Angelus turned like 200 years ago, who has now come back to LA to be a serial killer, to try to get Angel's, not really to get Angel's attention again actually, I think, but just to like relive. It's very unclear why he's there,
with the most inconsistent accent anyone has had of all time, and
he has classic kind of early 2000s hacker look. He has a really tiny goatee, spiky gel hair, glasses, all this kind of stuff. And it's just all over the place because it's like really the thrust of the episode is meant to be this interesting what if a vampire was a serial killer thing. I've said it before, I've said it again, don't make your serial killers supernatural because it makes both sides of that coin less interesting. And he is like killing people in a way that in a really contrived plot point, Angel is able to share dreams with Jeremy Renner, who has a character named Penn, but I'm going to call him Jeremy Renner. And so Angel is suspecting maybe he's gone evil again for some reason. But then he's like, no, lol, it's great. Actually, people have died while you've been chained to the bed. It was Jeremy Renner. And in the course of this, we see the peak of Angel's relationship with Kate Lockley, who's the police detective who's been helping him, because it's all downhill after here because she finds out he's a vampire and that vampires are real and it's all terrible. Everything's terrible.
She's not very happy.
Huge inconsistencies in this episode with just so much established lore. Angel casually saying, oh yeah, people I've sired, I can see their dreams, and never engage with again. The fact that Penn seems to have no awareness of Drusilla or Spike or Darla or kind of any of that stuff around, and also isn't aware of the fact that Angel has being ensouled, as just really outside that whole, and obviously never mentioned again in any fashion. Because surely Angel didn't make that many vampires while he was a vampire. The way they treat it,
no, the vampires don't tend to make very many vampires because they're going to have to stick around and they're going to be annoying otherwise. And
there's an attempt to show, from a human perspective, how terrifying the whole vampire thing is. So whenever he's in scenes where Angel isn't there, he moves like what looks like super speed, like the
Bizarre.
Flash moving around the room.
Like, I mean, no vampires ever moved like that before. Why would you do it 4 seasons in?
Yeah. So it is actually meant to be implied that that's what vampires always look like to humans, but it's just very, very strange.
It's very Twilight.
Yeah, and we have some great kind of two-hand comedy where Wesley thinks that Angelus has returned and is trying to get Cordelia to stake him, and like, to be fair, she turns on him very quickly and is about to stake him, and really kind of seeing Wesley as this like bumbling arch kind of briggish, demon hunter, tip through, I'm going to come join your gang here in LA, and then at the end Kate runs Angel through with an enormous kakistos size stake and stabs Jeremy Renner in the heart, who's behind him.
How she knew to do that?
How she's done it? How if a vampire mistakenly keeps a pencil and a pocket protector in this show, they explode in a cloud of dust. But she's able to specifically shatter Angel's spine, presumably, and pierce Jeremy Renner's heart. It is it is very odd and disconcerting episode. It's like something that would be broadcast at 2 a.m. on crimetv.org,
Yeah,
whatever.
it's just so bad.
And the fact that it's Jeremy Renner is just adds to the strangeness of the whole thing. It's a very bad episode. I would say probably 4 failed feminist gestures out of 10. It's not good, but I love watching it because it makes no sense.
I was gonna say 5 failed feminist gestures. Like, I've no major problem with it. I thought it was ridiculous, but like kind of as ridiculous as any of the episodes have been so far. I had to listen to a bit of a podcast the other day because our friend Dara sent it to us, and it was, I can't remember what the podcast was, but it was
let's not draw any specific ire here.
Yeah, but it was basically this guy on this podcast being like, I think that Angel is a better TV show than Buffy. Well, actually, no, he's American, so I'm not sure what I was doing. Like at the same.
Was he underwater while he was recording this?
Anyway, so and he was like, yeah, season 1 of Angel is so much better than season 1 of Buffy, and it's so much more well established and much more moody and better. It's much more relatable because like Angel's looking for redemption and Buffy's just like the Vampire Slayer. It's like, I cannot believe that this person, this adult, sat down and watched through both of those shows and misunderstood them both so extensively. It was awful. I hated it. This
person may become the big bag of this podcast, introduced 4 seasons in.
Okay, I'm ready to wrap up, Joel. I'm fed up with this shit.
What Brian means with that, obviously, and I know you understand this, dear listeners, is thank you very much for joining us again for another week of Buffy Boys. We're happy to have you here. Keeping us, if not saying at least consistent through this uncertain time. And we hope that you are all well, that you're washing your hands, and that you are taking this opportunity to catch up on your favourite.
And don't forget, if you haven't written a novel during this time period, think about that in yourself. Wonder how much you have failed. This is the time that you said, if you ever got some time to yourself, you would write that novel, and you haven't. Why not? What's wrong with you?
And on the other side of that argument, dear listener, I'm proud of you personally. I'm personally proud of you. Thank you very much for joining us this week. Tell your friends, tell your ambiguously humanoid demon apocalypse talisman stealing child murder helper.
Who knows?
And be well.
Okay.
And we will see you next time on Buffy Boys.
Buffy Boys.
See ya.
Bye-bye.